welcome to today's edition of One Single Story. It is October the 29th, and it is one of our weekend one-on-ones. I'm here with Pastor Jay today. We're in John chapter 11, the last part of it. So kind of to set the table, it's verse 45 says, many people who were with Mary believed in Jesus when they saw this happen. So that's kind of a weird place to jump in. What has happened is Lazarus has been raised from the dead.
Yeah. It's had that dramatic calling him out.
Right. Yeah.
And obviously there were a lot of witnesses to that event.
Yeah. We don't often think about how many people. There's another passage that happens later. I think we discuss it in next week maybe. And it was she anoints his feet, and it says there that they are out to kill Lazarus because so many people are coming to Christ.
Get rid of the witness. I mean, the miracle.
People are coming to Christ because of it.
Yeah, so they want to eliminate the very thing that he is literally raised up.
And so that's what's going on, that's causing people to believe. And I mean, like if I saw somebody rise from the dead, I would
probably believe them.
I have never only one account in my life I've never seen it, with my eyes. But one account of a person that I knew well who said they saw with their own eyes. Mm-hmm. There was a church in Indonesia in the denomination I grew up in. It was a really, really large church. And somebody in the church died. Mm-hmm. And they had the funeral. They were having the funeral. And the person was down at the front of the church. And the funeral was going on. And this new believer, he hadn't been saved very long. He jumped up and said, I don't understand. We believe Jesus can raise people from the dead. Why haven't we prayed? And nobody knew what to do.
Yeah.
And so he walks over to the body and he prays. And
they come back?
They came back to life.
Wow.
And this person relayed to me like the place went into complete pandemonium.
I can only imagine. But he has a big element of truth there. There are some circumstances and situations. Death would often would be one of those. But there are some other things too that we just resign it. That's the way it is without believing. I mean, I'm as guilty as anybody.
Yeah, me too. And we prop God up with if it's your will, if the timing's right, all of those things, because we want people listening to go, we've given him all the outs just in case he don't come through. But they didn't pray like that in the Bible. You didn't find, a whole lot of let's give him an out. They just prayed and said, this is what we're going to believe. But it's the story goes on. It says, but some went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. Then the leading priests and Pharisees called out the high council together. What are we going to do? They asked each other. This man certainly performs many miraculous signs. If we allow him to go on like this, soon everyone will believe in him. Then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. So verse 46, it says, many believed. 45 says many believed. 46, though, says some wanted just to go be tattletales.
Yeah.
How do you deal with those kind of troublemakers who are there for no other reason than to be conduits of gossip?
Yeah. Well, I think, first of all, you have to recognize those people do exist. They always have. They always will. They're going to be that element of people. No matter how good things are, how wonderful, how miraculous, how good. And let's talk about the church. Doesn't matter how many good things are being done, programs, there are folks who are always going to be divisive and try to talk, communicate, gossip, spread rumors, whatever title you want to apply to it, just to create problems. And you think about that has to be a miserable person, though.
Yeah, well, they have it doesn't appear that they have any motive other than to stir up trouble?
Yeah, because obviously they already knew that there was contention.
But if you ask them, they would tell you something different, right?
Sure.
Don't you think they would say,
I'm just giving a report.
We saw it. We were testifying.
We saw it with our own eyes. We want y'all to know about it, when in reality that obviously wasn't their motive. But it seems so strange that you can read this passage and these people, eyewitness, somebody coming back from dead after 4 days of death. It wasn't like, they were dead for 4 minutes, 4 hours, and it could have been something else. 4 days later, they saw this event take place, and yet their response is something other than belief or worship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I see people who tell things that their response is for no other reason than, have you heard? That's all. They want to be the person in the know, and they're not trying to help. If you ask them, they would give you some rote answer that sounded spiritual, but they don't mean any good by it.
For some folks, I think it's just the excitement, the anticipation of being the delivery person of the message. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I don't know if it makes them feel important, but if they can get it out there before somebody else.
Yeah, and I will tell you from my point of view, and I sometimes it's discernment, sometimes I miss it, but there are people who come and tell me things who genuinely are concerned. Mm-hmm. There are other people who come and tell me things that have no concern. They're just stirring up trouble.
They just want to stir it up. And sometimes I think the motive is they are laying out their opinions and feelings, and they're looking for support or validity. It's kind of like building some momentum for their cause.
So what happens is they can't deny the miracles. I mean, raising somebody from the dead is pretty significant. But they feel like they've got to do something, or they're going to lose control of what they have control over. Yeah. Why does religion seek to protect the status quo?
That's such a relevant question, even in our culture now, that there seems to be this intentionality of protecting the status quo. We don't want to upset things. We don't want to deal with things that are difficult or troublesome. I think even in verse 48, I think, in my opinion, there's some deceit even in their response as far as when they say, if we allow this to go on, soon everyone will believe in him. That's true part. That's the control part. I think they don't want to give up. Then they make this application, then the Roman army will come and destroy both our temple and our nation. I think even not only have they heard this message come and delivered to them, and now they're trying to justify their position on this, when in actuality, you talked about it is control, and there's something about our nature that wants to be in control, whether it's on a small scale, big scale, whether it's at home, it's at work, it's at church, and for people who tend to, at least in their mind perception, they are in some sense of control, they often fight feverishly to protect and defend that. Even if there's a better option out there, they don't want to give it up.
Yeah, and I think change is a difficult thing. And we become comfortable with what we have and what we are, and when that is challenged, it's the unknown that causes us to want to resist. In their case, I think they were afraid they would lose power, they would lose influence. Sure. That church may look completely different than what they thought it was going to look like.
You think about these guys, in particular the Pharisees, who perceive themselves as the smartest, the brightest. They perceived that they knew the Torah, the law, better than anybody else. They were strict in their adherence to it. And all of a sudden, here's this guy on the scene getting all the notoriety, all the attention. And not only that, he's actually doing things that only could be equated to the power of God. And they know full well if they don't do something, there's going to be a huge shift in the attention and the focus, because they've been the center for a long time. Where
everybody's come to them.
Yes, always look to them because they were the go-to guys, and now all of a sudden that is being threatened in their minds.
Well, it goes on, verse 49 says, Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time, said, "You don't know what you're talking about. You don't realize that it's better for you that one man should die for the people than for the whole nation to be destroyed." He did not say this on his own. As high priest at that time, he was led to prophesy that Jesus would die for the entire nation, and not only for that nation, but to bring together and unite all the children of God scattered around the world. So it says Caiaphas is moved on to prophesy, and he does. The question that I have is he prophesying something he didn't understand, or did he know exactly what he was saying when he said it?
I think this is, to me, I see this as a dual statement. In my mind, the way I read it and try to understand it is, I think he was responding out of his own sense of intellect and understanding, saying that, no, we're going to wind up getting rid of him in order to protect all of us and the good of the whole. But at the same time, he was actually prophesying what was going to take place on a much larger scale for all of humanity, that one man was going to have to suffer and die for the good of the entire world. And so I think it was both of those applications.
Yeah, this is a really challenging passage for me because it says he didn't say it on his own. It said he was led to do it.
He was prompted to do it. We have some other insights to Caiaphas, his demeanor and approach to some things, but it is very interesting to note that he still was led to prophesy or speak truth, even though he may not have had the right motives all the time that was going on in his life.
And I just don't know whether he knew exactly what he was saying or not. He should have known that there was going to be a Messiah, but whether he put the two together, I don't know.
Yeah, I would almost think he didn't understand or comprehend all that he was saying himself, but he was declaring truth at that moment.
Yeah, so it says, so from that time on, the Jewish leaders began to plot Jesus' death. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people and left Jerusalem. He went to a place near the wilderness, to the village of Ephraim, and stayed there with his disciples. So the first thing is, the leaders here are participating in the plan of God without knowing it. Have you ever seen that happen? Have you ever seen people unwittingly participate in God's divine plan, and they didn't realize how they were moving the ball forward for the kingdom?
Yeah, I have seen situations on an individual basis. I have seen it to some degree, and I think you don't have to look far and long to see it on a larger scale, sometimes with groups of people, perhaps even nations that, as you said, move the needle forward for God's plan and purpose, and they may be totally clueless as to they are actually part of his plan and purpose to carry those things out.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, it's interesting. You read church history, you read the Bible. When you get to the book of Acts, the church begins to be persecuted and they spread. The gospel spreads around the world. If they didn't want it to spread, the better option would have been to let them have it easy.
Left them alone.
Yeah.
Kept them confined.
That's right. Just let them do their, give them positions in the city.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have evangelized.
Yeah.
I don't think they would evangelize the world. So what they unwittingly believed was punishment became the seed for the word of God to spread. And I see it happen frequently where certain things happen and unwittingly it creates revival, or it creates a turning back to God, or it creates a desire to follow after him. And people don't quite see it. It may be another example. When 9/11, 21 years ago now, their motive was to harm us, but at least in the immediate aftermath, it drove people to pray.
Yeah.
It made people unified.
It did.
And it was an unexpected, at least on their part, place of they moved the ball forward for the kingdom some, even though they were trying to destroy
even though
it.
that wasn't their intent. I find 54 very interesting. As a result, Jesus stopped his public ministry among the people and left Jerusalem. And it gives us a little insight here. He knew his time wasn't yet for them to be able to take him and to kill him, but he made a conscious decision to stop what he was doing, ministering and serving the people, because he knew there was a greater purpose that needed to be delayed, what was going to take place with him. And I was just curious, have you ever had a time or season where you felt like you were intentional about interrupting ministry or service to people in order to accomplish a greater good on the backside further down the road?
The short answer is not enough. I can think of a couple of times where, I would step away from all the things that were going on to try to spend some time alone. I spent some time at a monastery in Moldova for 3 or 4 days, alone. That was a relatively unusual thing, for me, especially just to be alone by myself. I would say there have been times that I interrupted things because I felt like that was what needed to be done in preparation. But I think this passage often gets misunderstood, and they think Jesus was scared and he went into hiding more than it was. He knew it was a timing thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you see it?
I agree. Because in order to, when I say protect himself in the sense of keeping them from getting ahead of the timing of God for God's ultimate plan and purpose for Jesus, that had to be delayed. And so it was necessary for him to step away.
Yeah, and we don't know, because he leaned heavily on the disciples to work after the resurrection. We don't know what went on in those days that he spent with them, because he didn't go by himself. He did take them with him, almost like a retreat.
Exactly.
As an opportunity to talk. Well, so it closes by saying, it is now almost time for the Jewish Passover celebration, and many people from all over the country arrived in Jerusalem several days early so they could go through the purification ceremony before Passover began. They kept looking for Jesus, but as they stood around the temple, they said to each other, "What do you think? He won't come for Passover, will he?" Meanwhile, the leading priests and Pharisees had publicly ordered that anyone seeing Jesus must report it immediately so they could arrest him. How long do you think this period of time was? And do you think the people who are saying, he's not going to come, is he, were wanting him to stay in hiding, or were they mocking him for staying in hiding?
I'll take it there and maybe back up with it. I don't think they were mocking him. I think there was some anticipation, some longing, I think even perhaps to hear him, to see him, to hear him teach and speak again, and perhaps perform some more miracles, in their presence. And I think they're like saying, because they've already heard that the priests and Pharisees have said, anybody, if you see him, you better report him so we can arrest him. And they know the conflict that's going on. And to me, it's like they're a bit torn. You don't think he's going to actually show up, do you, here? And if he does, then we're in this tension of following what they've told us to do at the same time. And it says that they arrived in Jerusalem several days early, so they go through this process. What is several? I don't know. We're not sure. But there was a prolonged period of time where obviously he was just incognito. He was in the distance. As they were going through this, it's kind of ironic to me that they make all this effort to get to Jerusalem. They're going through the purification process, which would have been many things from the bathing and how they prepared their clothes to the animal sacrifices, and they're going through all this, and yet such a large group of them have missed the very intent and what's pointing to what is coming in the future.
Yeah, I think there's a danger at both ends of the spectrum. You can become so enamored with the ritual that you miss the work that Jesus is trying to do. And then you can become so enamored with what you believe is the spontaneous work of God that
you miss all
you don't
structural
participate in the
planning
structure,
and the infrastructure that's necessary to propagate, carry on ministry.
That allows other people to participate. So,
yeah, good point.
Yeah. All right, you want to close this in prayer?
Lord, we thank you for this word today that has reminded us that we should seek you and worship you and pursue you and believe in you, even in the absence of miracles. Thank you for reminding us that we have a plan and a purpose according to your will, and sometimes we don't understand it or we don't even know the timing of it. Help us to walk in obedience for what you've laid out before us, and so that we'll not only be obedient to your will, but the timing of that will play out for its maximum purpose and for your glory and honor. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen.